Hello and welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Beverly's Breakroom. If you are watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Instagram, hello. It's so great to see you. We are back again with more hot topics that I'm sure folks want to know because I get asked about these topics a lot. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Beverly. I am a chief operating officer and your chief empowerment officer, dedicating my platform to educating you on the gate kept tips that often are kept from folks as they are looking to scale and navigate their careers. I've worked for over a decade in over 10 fields. And so when I tell you I got some experience, I got some experience. And I'm excited to chat with you today about our topic, which is reading the warning signs before layoffs hit. Over the last year, layoffs have hit the um, really every industry in the United States, but also across the world, very hard. Not only that, but we also have seen an increase of folks not able to get another opportunity very quickly afterwards. There used to be a time where you could you might get laid off, or you might get, might be transitioned from a role, but that would be okay because with unemployment and a little bit of time, you would be back on your feet again at a new company. The difficulty now is that there are folks who are, in my DMs, in my comment section, who have been unemployed for 10 months, 12 months, 18 months, and are doing everything they can to get back to stability. So what happens when you are in a role and you want to ensure that you are protecting yourself and preparing yourself for if layoffs hit? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I have a quick graphic that I'm going to put up that is helpful to guide us as we talk about some warning signs. Because as a COO, there are signs that people may not know to look out for that can help you, especially if you are really trying to be proactive. This is a graphic from caffeinatedkyle.com, and I will actually share in the YouTube description his website that he has with this article talking about his perspective. But here are a couple of high level signs that may be a sign that layoffs are coming. And he's speaking specific to the tech industry, but these are also, in my experience, pretty consistent across the board. The first is hiring is frozen. So if you notice that and previous months ago, your company was hiring, and then all of a sudden, oh, you know what, we've closed our positions for the time being, or it's been a while since anybody new has been hired. That could be a sign. Cost saving initiatives are implemented. Sometimes leaders will tell on themselves by saying that we're really looking to save costs right now, and so our focus is XYZ for this quarter. Pay attention to how they focus their objectives over the course of the months thereafter, because that could be a sign that a layoff is coming. New projects are delayed or canceled. This is one that is really, really tricky because there have been plenty of times in my career where um, somebody I might have a project, or somebody else may have a project, and then all of a sudden priorities shift, and that doesn't inherently mean that a layoff is coming, but it can be a sign if multiple departments are paused on initiatives that have already been scoped and were slated to roll out. Restructuring occurs. So this is a subject that, or definition, I should say, that I've said many times before. Restructuring is another fancy term for layoffs. However, a lot of companies do restructure ethically, where they move different departments around. And essentially, what a restructuring is, when it's done correctly, is they're trying to assess, okay, what departments need to be shifted around, what priorities, and these departments, maybe we need different roles, maybe we need new roles. And when that happens, oftentimes at the end of it, they look around and see who no longer applies with the new vision of the organization, and then they restructure that department, meaning they lay off people. Company performance has declined. So if you have a company that has all hands meetings, or regular monthly meetings, and you notice that each month they're talking about how projects aren't going the way they should, or there are other elements there, that could be a sign too. A merger or acquisition is announced. This also, I mean, this is pretty common to see as well. And then leaders are exiting if they're jumping ship. So this is a graphic to really kick us off and get us started as we head into the topic today. And of course, as always, at the end of our session, if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them at the end of our talk together. And if you're on Instagram watching live, please heart the chat. Please comment where you're watching from. And thank you so much. I see some folks are returning again from previous Beverly's break rooms. So thank you so much for being here. So here's the definition, right? Layoff warning signs are organizational signals. These are signals that you can learn over time to pick up and adapt to. And those are either financial, operational, or behavioral signals that indicate a company is preparing for workforce reductions. Oftentimes, and especially over the last year in discussion relating to layoffs, a lot of folks have felt blindsided. They felt like, they were doing really great. And then all of a sudden they are hit with a layoff. There are signs, and as I always like to say, companies are not typically original. A lot of them, carry habits from one company to the next, and so there are things that you can look out for. And most employees don't recognize these signals until the layoff is announced, and by then you're scrambling. You're trying to make sure that everything's afloat. You're trying to get your resume together. You weren't prepared, and there's a lot of strategy with where this comes from and why companies lay off the way they do, including executive decision making frameworks that are taught in MBA programs. You may not have realized that there are, classes and frameworks dedicated to laying off your staff and how to do so, the compliant way. But as we've seen now in the current zeitgeist, that framing has obviously, it shifts depending on the ethics of the organization. And oftentimes this is gate kept because leaders don't want to tell folks that layoffs are coming. They want to prevent panic. I actually remember one time where I worked at an organization where we were going to restructure a few folks. And I said, why can't we give these folks a heads up and let them know that these may be coming so they can prepare? And the response I received from senior leadership was, well, they still have some projects that we want them to complete before we make these decisions and before we ultimately cut the cord. And if that isn't heartless, I don't know what is, right? Because these folks have no clue that their cord's about to be cut because the company wants to see these projects completed. And that's just one example. Earlier in my career, similarly, asking the question like, why can't we give folks a runway? Similar responses were given. Now on the positive side, where I have seen this done really well, is the brand Amico. I actually did a video about this where the CEO of Amico actually not only warned her team, she set up her team for success, and she gave her team uh, the roadmap to be able to, get opportunity, as well as promoted her staff members on her personal profile so that folks could reach them. So there are ethical ways that you can warn folks and also give them the opportunity to succeed. But this is gate kept often for a reason. Um, so, as we're chatting, right, how this can show up. So, if maybe, and this is a scenario that I want you to think through, and maybe this has happened for you. Over the past 3 months, you might have noticed maybe leadership keeps talking about efficiency or doing more with less. These are some key trigger words that are often used. Hiring freezes are announced, like I said before. Maybe you, if you're a leader, your budget gets cut mid-year. Maybe you got pre-approved for certain initiatives, and they tell you that that's not possible. Look out for them highlighting that consultants from large conglomerates like McKinsey or Deloitte are on site evaluating processes. I've mentioned before that sometimes organizations will utilize consultants as the scapegoat and say, well, we've hired the best and they have advised us to reduce labor. And that way, the blame is shifted to these, consultants who are saying it's best practice for the business instead of poor business practices that resulted in folks being laid off. Um, and then again, I mentioned about like communication, leadership leaving, and they're not replaced when they leave. And you may think to yourself, well, things are tight right now, but things are fine. I haven't heard anything. We've gone through this before. But then in this scenario, you do get the layoff notification and you're blindsided. What you didn't know is that every single one of those signals was a predictor, and leadership may have been planning this for months. You could have been preparing, updating your resume, networking, saving money, interviewing elsewhere in that entire time. But a lot of times, unfortunately, folks don't, and you're caught unprepared, especially in this hiring market. That's not something that I want for you. And I know that you don't want for yourself. An anecdote that I think is really important to add here is marginalized employees are often hit harder by layoffs. And there's a lot of studies to support this. There's less access to insider information, excluding Beverly's Breakroom. So you're here, you're getting the insider information. But a lot of times, folks from marginalized groups are excluded from the informal networks where rumors start to spread, less likely to have mentors or sponsors who can give them advance warning. This is where I've said it's really important that you are developing relationship with senior leaders at your organization so they can give you the heads up or warn you. Last in, first out practices that disproportionately affect newer employees, which are often either younger employees or recent grads. And then layoffs can often target redundancies in support function, where sometimes it's seen across corporate. Women and people of color are typically concentrated. Um, so it's really important that you're paying attention to those signs, right? Especially as we enter 2026. So, tactic number one is monitor financial and strategic signals. Even if you yourself are not a leader at the organization, you can still pay attention to company financial health and strategic changes that predict layoffs. A few financial signals that can really help you is revenue decline for 2+ consecutive quarters. Like if they transparently share in all hands meetings their metrics, you can look over time and go, wait a second, last month the numbers look different. A lot of times leaders aren't expecting employees to pay very much attention. And so if you are, that can be a good pre-indicator. If they mention missed earnings targets or leadership's talking about belt tightening, like I said before, efficiency, optimization, right? Budget cuts across departments. If you hear rumors or maybe even complaints, sometimes folks will complain at lunch about, we've had some of our budgets cut. Those are some financial signals. Strategic signals, if you hear about a merger or acquisition being announced, maybe redundancies can follow from there because if they're merging, they're going to look and see, okay, what do we actually need versus, what does the merging entity have that we can fold into. um, New CEOs or CFOs are brought in. This is often mandated for a lot of CEOs in order to cut costs. They will come in, they will assess, they will look based off of the strategy of the organization. And this is something that I've said before that senior leadership, when they are hired for a reason. Typically, it is because of a very specific set of skills that they have in a specific, whether that be industry or niche or focus that the board wants the company to go into. And so they are looking around at the company to see if the people who are at the company um, are going to fit into that new strategy. Um, and restructuring is announced, reorganizations announced, shifts in business model strategy, even outsourcing initiatives. If you hear a lot about third party resources to support contracting support, that could be a sign. And of course, there's been a lot of dialogue about AI implementation and what that can look like, and a lot of roles that are highly administrative that folks feel can be replaced by AI may be targeted. However, I want to put an asterisk in that because I've said before and I'll say again that I think a lot of the AI concerns, even if you layoffs have happened because they've said it's due to AI, I think there's going to be a massive pendulum swing back to those roles being filled with people because AI is not a human being. It is not able to critically think. Can it help create systems? Can it help optimize workflows? Absolutely. But it'll never replace a person. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are going to figure that out too late and it's going to negatively impact their bottom line. Um, and there's a lot of other signals, like I mentioned before, operationally and on the consultative side, that will be important for you to pay attention to. But why this is important for you is because if you're reading the same signals that executives are reading, then you're going to start thinking like an executive, right? So at every company you then work for, your ears are naturally going to pick up, oh, wait a second, Beverly taught me these words, or Beverly, let me know the warning signs I should be looking for. Let me pay attention to this meeting cuz something doesn't feel right. You're also giving yourself lead time to prepare, because once you start hearing these things or seeing these signals, you can start making the prep work for yourself to get prepared. And ultimately, you won't be caught off guard when the announcement comes. Everybody else will be freaking out, but you would have sensed it for 3 months and would have been prepping and accordingly, if not interviewing by that point. And like I said before, these signals don't necessarily guarantee layoffs, but they do significantly increase the probability if there's patterns attached to them too. Leadership will deny layoffs too. So even if you're seeing these patterns, you'll notice that other people will see them and they'll go to leadership and they'll say, "Hey, I'm a little concerned. Look, are layoffs coming? Do we need to be worried?" And of course, like I said before, leaders don't want to risk folks leaving. They don't want flight risks. So they're going to say whatever they need to get you to feel comfortable so folks don't jump ship too prematurely. So it's really important for you to be paying attention to those signs. Tactic two, position yourself as irreplaceable. Now, contrary to popular belief, there are ways that you can position yourself to be unfireable. Now, obviously, stability is a fictitious concept in this current hiring market. And I think a lot of folks know that and they feel that. But there are a lot of ways that you can make it so that it's really hard to select you when that time comes. The first way to do it is tying your work to revenue generation or protection. So, in previous conversations, I've talked about when you are in all hands meetings, when you're talking to your supervisor, quantify your financial impact. So, hey, I just want to let you know that this recent automation that I set up is actually going to save our department X amount of dollars. Or, hey, I just wanted to follow up. And that client that I onboarded, I just looked at their total lifetime value and it's actually this amount. Start quantifying in your one-on-ones and then committing to documentation your financial contributions to the organization, because that is going to help them say, well, no, we got to keep, this person because they're saving us money or they're making us money with their processes. And that is in every department. It doesn't matter what industry you work in. It doesn't matter what department you work in. Every department and industry has the ability to do this. Build relationships with decision makers. Networking internally is really important. I know you may know this, but it is, because if you are in partnership, especially with high visibility, I did a video about this previously. Senior leaders, if they know you and they feel like you are in alignment with the mission, you're in alignment with where the organization is going, you're going to have advocates in the room when layoff decisions are made. And I made a video and I talked about it in a previous episode. I have literally seen with my eyes people get stopped from being laid off because a senior leader stepped in at the last minute and said, no, they get it. They're visible. They're this, they're that, whatever their rationale was. You want those folks in the room advocating for you to stick around. And they can't advocate for you if you're not visible. So make sure you're doing so. Demonstrating your unique value as well. Do you have skills or knowledge that no one else has at the organization? Are you the only person who knows critical systems or processes? Do you have key client relationships? Are you leading high priority projects? Do an audit of your unique value at your organization and what it is that you uniquely are contributing. And if you can't find anything that you feel is like super unique in comparison to anyone else, now is the opportunity for you to start thinking, okay, what are the ways that I can put my personal stamp on this role and in ways that are going to make me stand out, and ultimately protect me in the long run. Um, be high I love this phrasing of be high performance, low maintenance. So consistently deliver results. You don't be the person with complaints or drama. And this is really important too. If you start feeling like a layoff may be coming, I will tell you, there was one time where I worked at an organization where we had laid off a group of folks. And so when that happened, so much anxiety, people were stressed, they were concerned that they were next. And leadership got annoyed because there were several employees who were regularly like, all that's all they wanted to talk about at lunch and meetings behind closed doors. And it was getting back to them that several employees, like, all they were talking about was some negativity around it. And obviously, so they're nervous, they're concerned, they want to feel validated about their concerns. But it wound up becoming distracting because then other folks started to get nervous, and then other folks and other folks, and you can see that it became disruptive for business. So, any drama, things like that, one ear out the other. And then, of course, be reliable. Make sure you are documenting. document, document, document. While all of these things won't guarantee that you'll survive, because sometimes great people get cut. We're seeing that with 600,000 plus Black women being cut from the workforce last year. Great people are being cut, and a lot of that has nothing to do with you. However, wherever you can document and document and document your impact and what you're doing, it does make it especially difficult for them also to fire for performance related issues. I mean, it all protects you, even if it's not for layoffs. Having that documentation at the ready can be helpful if you have a toxic leader who's trying to put you on a pit. Like, there's so many implications that you can use it for. And then tactic three is prepare your exit strategy immediately. The moment that your spidey senses start tingling, I want you to start your preparation. So build your emergency fund if you can, whether that be 3 to 6 months of expenses. Obviously, in this market, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So that may not be possible, but do what you can to say, okay, if, now that I'm feeling like we may potentially have a layoff coming, guys, we're going to, maybe we're going to cut some of the streaming services for now, or we're going to start, living a little lean, or we're going to see where we can cut some things just in case. If it doesn't wind up coming to fruition, great. You might have saved some money on the side that you can, allocate somewhere else. But otherwise, you start transitioning yourself so that you can be prepared. Um, Understand what your severance eligibility is. Different organizations have different severance allotments. Some companies, they give you a certain amount for every year you're there. Others have a set rate, and make sure that like, this is what I feel a fair severance is based off of my tenure, based off of how long I've been here, and here's what I'm willing to fight for. Have that at the ready so again, you're not blindsided. Review unemployment benefits in your state. A lot of folks, don't do that until it's the 11th hour. And so pay attention. Who do I need to file with? Have all your paperwork ready in a folder ready to go in the event that you have to do it, because then you're not stressed about, okay, now I have to sit down and file, because it's traumatizing. Layoffs are traumatizing. I did an episode of my podcast, How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace, about this 2 weeks ago. It is traumatizing to be laid off. And so so you don't even have to think about it, just pre-fill out any forms or any things that you might need to do after the fact so you don't have to worry about it. Um, and then update your resume immediately with recent accomplishments and metrics. My class, Tracking Your Own Metrics, which is available on my website and at my link in bio, it literally walks you through how to track these things in real time so that if in the event your job is at risk, you're not now trying to scramble and go back and figure out all of your achievements to self advocate. You'll have a long list because you would have started, if you grab the class tonight, right? You would have started this week with tracking those things. And then you would have a long list of things to put on your resume that are all quantifiable. Update your LinkedIn profile. And compile your portfolio or work samples within reason as it relates to NDA and so forth. Connect with your network, job search, start soft applying. Soft applying is really healthy anyway. Even if your company is not on the verge of a layoff, it is always good to keep your resume active, to keep the fish in the tank, for lack of a better term. And so you should be in that practice anyway of like soft searching, because you never know what could be out there. And in the event that your company isn't laying anyone off, but a better opportunity comes along, you would have been happy that you were soft searching in that process. And then you can make a transition to a better pay and better salary, right? Or better title, right? It may feel disloyal, but it really is self-preservation. And companies don't give you months of warning, so you have to create your own time frames that look the best and are the best for you. Um, so those are some tactics to prepare, as well as some oversights. And like I said, and I've said before, go to my link in bio to get those classes so you can grab your metrics tracker, grab the class on how to track them. And then of course, start documenting what you're seeing at work if you feel it's applicable so that you're not caught unawares. Um, in a moment, I'll open up to Q&A in the chat. But first, these are some frequently asked questions I get about how to predict for layoffs. The first one being, my company keeps saying no layoffs plan, but I'm seeing the warning signs. Should I believe them or trust my gut? Trust the signals, not the words. I need you to hear this from a COO. They are telling you no layoffs plan because they don't want you to run. It's what every company says until they announce layoffs. like they strategically can't announce layoffs also until they're ready, because a lot of times there's legal ramifications as well. And they can't announce it yet, right? So they're saying no layoffs plan, meaning, which often means we haven't finalized the plan yet, but we're not telling you what it is. Leadership also, to give them benefit of the doubt, they may not even know if layoffs are coming depending on where they are in the hierarchy. This has also been the case too, where I've worked at an organization where literally none of the leaders knew that a layoff was coming until the literally last second. And that was just, of course, disgruntling for them too. So you may go to your leader and they may say, no, not as far as I know. And then a week later, there's a layoff. Don't blame your leader. They literally might not have known. And a lot of times that happens, especially at bigger organizations. Trust your gut always. Another question I frequently get is, I just started this job 6 months ago. Am I more at risk of layoffs because I'm new? Oftentimes the answer is yes. Last in, first out is a common phrasing, but it's not universal, but it's common. So how, there's a lot of ways to prepare for that, because many companies use tenure as a factor in layoff decisions. They'll say, okay, well, this person's only been here 6 months. We'll cut them, because also less severance is owed to those folks. So it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your impact. It has nothing to do with how well you're doing your role. A lot of times newer employees often have less political capital and fewer advocates. So going back to what I said previously about having people in the room who are going to vouch for you and celebrate you, a lot of newer employees haven't built those relationships yet. So they don't have anybody in the room who is saying, hey, not them. But don't panic about that. Um, make sure you're using those tactics, getting yourself prepared, keeping things up to date. And you can frame that in interviews too, where you're saying, I had a great opportunity there. It was wonderful. And it looked like, everyone who was under 6 months employment at the organization was laid off. And so, I'm back in my search process. You can highlight that without it weighing you down in your process. Question 3, I see warning signs, but I have a family. I can't afford to quit without another job. What do I do? You don't have to quit. And I've actually seen this before, where folks have seen layoffs on the horizon and they jump ship, they freak out. They're like, I'm just going to quit because I can't deal with it. No, no, no. Don't put yourself at risk, because again, like I said, there may not be a layoff coming and you wouldn't have wanted to do that. But, update your resume, activate your network, start interviewing, research the benefits in your state and severance policies you'd be okay with, so that if it does happen, you're not panicked. You have a Google Drive folder with everything that you need, everything pre-filled out, so that you are feeling prepared and like you're in control. Question 4, what if I'm wrong and there are no layoffs? Won't I have wasted time and energy preparing? No, preparing for layoffs is never wasted effort. First of all, you should always be updating your resume. You should always be updating your LinkedIn. You should always be soft searching and networking anyway. Like, that is a healthy practice that, if you are, passionate and committed to growing in your career, you should always be doing. So it's never a wasted effort to be prepared and to ensure that you are putting yourself in the best position possible. And then finally, my entire team is anxious about potential layoffs. Should we talk about it, or will that make leadership think we're not committed? Talk about it with trusted colleagues, but be strategic about what you say and to whom. I am telling you, do not create uh, pandemonium through that anxiety, because like I said, I've seen this before, where folks are anxious, they're talking to each other, it gets back to leadership, and then there's an annoyance, because like I said, they may not be able to tell if there's a layoff coming, or they may be frustrated because they were going to tell that a layoff was coming, and now there's chaos. But absolutely talk to, trusted folks in your network, and be careful about what you say in official channels that can be audited or subpoenaed, like emails or Slack channels. If you can take that at a coffee chat, where there's no phones, no texting, things like that, you can absolutely do that. But don't let fear make you paranoid, because you deserve to feel safe at work. Just, if you're feeling that in your gut, you absolutely should talk to somebody so that you can get the support you need. And that was the topic for today. There are, like I said, a ton of signs. And if you are watching this live, you can go back to my YouTube and follow along with some of the tactics that I shared, so that you can jot those down as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello. But those are just some warning signs that I wanted to share here on this Wednesday. And I want to open it up for Q&A and the live chat box if anybody has any questions for me at all. And while I wait for questions, I would be remiss because I do this every session. eh, um, Definitely want to highlight my website. If you want to work with me directly, whether you're in job transition, if you are growing in your role, you're looking to make a career pivot. There are so many resources available to you at beverlydines.com, including working with me with an empowerment session or with a package section if you want to jump right in. My book, Create the Door, is great if you are, that system, I should say, is good if you are trying to make career pivots. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to become a creator. Maybe you want to pivot and become a consultant. Whatever it is, that door you're trying to create for yourself. This package set is for you. And how to play the corporate game. If you are like Beverly, I am ready to own my brand. I'm ready to, step into that arena. Maybe be paid to speak. Maybe be paid to consult. Whatever that is. That is also a good avenue as well. And all of those resources are available at beverlydines.com for us to work together. And it would be lovely to work together. Are there any questions from the audience at all? Let's see here. Hey, New Jersey. Yes, and definitely let me know where you're tuning in from. It's so exciting. Or folks from all over the country in here. If we get laid off, is that a legible excuse to acquire unemployment? Yes, it is. So if you are laid off by the company, you absolutely qualify for unemployment because they let you go without cause. And also too, you know, if for whatever reason you apply for unemployment and they try to contest that, fight it because they laid you off. Sometimes, again, skeezy organizations who are trying to save costs, they will fight back, which is nuts to me and unethical. And you can just keep pushing. But typically, if they're doing a layoff, they understand that they're going to be responsible for unemployment, and it's part of the layoff strategy. How do you start a business as a consultant? Well, I will generalize this because in any environment, if you are looking to start a business as a consultant, and this goes back to my create the door framework. So if you are somebody who's been trying to get into consulting or start your own business, definitely consider going to my website and grabbing some time with me because I literally work with folks every week on these goals. Is Everybody and their mom is calling themselves a consultant now. And that may be the case. So in this market, as you are trying to differentiate yourself, the most important thing is to ask yourself, who's your target audience? Who's your target org? What is it that what problems do you have the answer to? Because anyone can consult, but what are you specifically answering and providing solutions for to your clients? Because that is going to be the framing device to be able to properly support anyone uh who is uh looking to work with you, is that you can sit on that as a part of your business strategy. I solve these problems, so that way it'll track the right clientele to you as well. But there's a lot of ways to set it up, and let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video on that. What rights do you have as an at-will employee in California? Thank you so much for this question. So I'm going to be transparent. As I've said before on my platform, I am not an attorney. I cannot provide like legal guidance, but there's a lot. Actually, California is one of the most robust um I almost said countries, states for employees. They have some of the most progressive protections in California, and there's a lot. obviously, federally, you're protected per the EEOC to be terminated based off of a protected class, discriminated against, retaliation for reporting wrongdoing is illegal. Um, Being fired while um, performing like a public duty or by adhering to public policy. There's a lot of protections in California for at will employees. So um, uh, definitely look up uh, your state's protections because there's a lot in Cali. Does the company Thank you all so much. Does the company need to give us a written statement for laid off? Typically, what an organization will do is they'll set a meeting with you in HR. Sometimes your manager will be there, sometimes they won't, and then they will tell you that you're being laid off, and then they will provide you with an email confirming that, as well as a severance document and layoff document to sign and agree to the terms of. That is typically when folks will get attorneys involved because if the severance does not look the way that you feel it should based off of your years of experience, your tenure, so on, you can retain an attorney who will advocate for you so that you can get a severance that is appropriate. So they will oftentimes give you a written statement to confirm. Awesome, I will. Thank you. My issues surround retaliation and hostile workplace with managers that hide behind and weaponize their inadequacies. I saved our department repeatedly, lots of money, discovered double billing. Hmm. Well, if you are experiencing consistent patterns of retaliation, that could be illegal, especially if you've reported wrongdoing to HR for what you've done. So I absolutely would recommend you go to my website. I have a class called Dealing with Bullies at Work that walks you through how to properly advocate. And protect yourself not only with documentation templates. I've got case studies in there. I have the federally protected classes, how to I even have some resources that I share too if you're looking for pro bono legal support. There's a lot in that class. And then I also have templates for documentation that you can get. They're called my crash out kits so that you avoid having a crash out in corporate. And that can give you the templating you need so that you have the right documentation to document the pattern of retaliation to advocate for yourself with governing bodies. So that is on my website, beverlydines.com. If you go to dealing with bullies at work, it's right there, and it walks you through how to protect yourself. And I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. It is incredibly overwhelming, um, to just want to do your job and have to deal with toxicity at work. Yep, beverlydines.com. Oh, hello, hello. We got a question here. What is the best move for legal protection if you live in one state, but the remote job is out of state? So, thank you for this question. Like I said, I am not a lawyer, so I cannot provide legal advice. But what I will say is that uh, my highest recommendation would be that if you are, doing a remote role out of state, you absolutely, if you're a permanent resident of that state, you absolutely, because you're working in that state, have protections. What those protections are, I don't want to misspeak. So I would highly recommend, researching your specific state as it relates to remote work because there may be specific policies in your state as it relates to that. But like I said to the previous commenter, document, 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 document. If you get a whiff that you're being maybe treated differently because you're a remote employee or you're experiencing discrimination or any of those elements, in my class at beverlydines.com, I walk through how you can protect yourself with documentation. But most importantly, um, if since you're remote, paying attention to what's happening in their state too. A couple of years ago, Illinois and I think I can't remember if this was federal or not. I'd have to go back to my notes, but Illinois mandated that organizations with unlimited PTO still had to pay out a certain PTO allotment to employees who leave the organization or have been laid off. I think it's up to 40 PTO hours. I have to go back and look at my notes, but there were mandates put in place because employers were with unlimited PTO were terminating employees or folks were leaving and they weren't getting PTO allotments. That was a groundbreaking advocacy effort that was put into place. So pay attention to what's happening in both your state and the state within which your company resides in, because there may be protections for you that you may not even realize you have access to based off of and also federally too, as a remote employee, that you can look at. And thank you so much for your question and welcome back. It's good to see you. And please make sure that you are subscribing if you're watching on YouTube. Follow if you are watching on Instagram. I am live Sunday through Thursday at 6 p.m., giving you all the real gate kept information and education so that you are best prepared. To scale in your career. And so please follow, please share. As you can see on my page, I do I have a lot of resources. Do I do private consultations for work concerns? I absolutely do. I meet with folks multiple times a week who have different concerns. Like I said before, and I will continue to reiterate, I am not a lawyer, and so I cannot provide you with legal consultation. But what I can do, and where I am an excellent partner, and it's actually one of the most fulfilling things for me to do, is to equip you with the strategy and the documentation processes to get you well positioned. So I recently worked with someone who's experiencing work concerns. And I helped them compile the documentation patterns that they needed based off of their situation. And then I gave them an action plan that they were able then to execute and go back and get the documentation, screenshots, things that they needed to be able to build their case, which they went to a lawyer and they were able to retain legal counsel because of how robust their documentation was and their patterns. So I can position you and support you with protections. And then when you do go to legal, you'll have a really, robust documentation pattern of what you're experiencing. So absolutely, I can support you there. Strategies, strategy is my thing, and SOPs and documentation and risk mitigation, all the things. Do I deal with a lot of jealous coworkers? you know, um, do I deal with a lot of jealous coworkers? I don't think I've ever been asked this before. Um, yes, I have in my career. Do I always have to deal with jealousy? No, but I want to just, if I'm looking at things with an empathetic lens, I am a bit of a spitfire, and that when I was, scaling in my career, early, right? I was always the youngest leader on the team. I'm outspoken by nature. I'm expressive. I am exuberant, and um I kind of come into organizations like a bolt of lightning, whether, folks there like it or not. And I think it's one of my great qualities. I'm also highly accountable and I hold people accountable. And so, where I think in my experience, jealousy has come into play is when I'm celebrated for playing the game really well. I will say, and this is just me, like, but it's not all me. It's mentors who've guided me and it's people who have lifted me up and supported me throughout. But I'm a fast learner, and that's something that my mentors have said. Like, I am a very fast adapter. There are folks who have been working at organizations, for 10 plus years, not getting a raise. I come in 6 months later, I'm getting promoted, and so I think that's where that jealousy comes in. But I think the hard part for me is I believe that there's room for all of us. And whenever I see somebody struggling, or whenever I see somebody, kind of giving me me that energy, I am always trying to be like, how can we lift each other up? How can we partner on a project? How can we do something together? I do not believe in gatekeeping that way, and I haven't in my career. But if but I think what's hard is, like, especially legacy employees, people who've been there a long time, that's why I'm always because of them, really, like, I always am encouraging my audience to not stay at companies for longer than 4 years, because they shelf life incredible employees who then become resentful, and they become angry, and they become stressed because they are not being celebrated the way they should. They aren't being developed. They aren't being, grown into new opportunities. So then when the new person comes into the role and they're killing it and they're being promoted, they're being rewarded, a lot of it is shiny object syndrome. And a lot of it also is that this person is fixing things that the company needs quickly, and whatever that capacity means. And leave an organization before you get to a place where you're resentful. But if you're dealing with jealous coworkers at work, you have to remind yourself that it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing. Jealousy is a projection. And any time in my life where I have felt jealous about what somebody else has had, it has always resulted in me having to ask myself really critical questions about why I envy. Like, why am I feeling jealous about something that I don't have, or I feel like I don't have? What do I feel like I'm not getting from my experience at this company, or my experience in this relationship, or whatever the case, where I am looking over there? And then after I have that conversation with myself, I say, okay, um, you know, what do I need to do to make it a reality so I'm no longer jealous, because I don't like to carry that energy on my spirit. It's not a good feeling, and it's negative, it permeates. But a lot of folks don't have that internal dialogue. They sit with that jealousy, and then it makes everything difficult for everyone else. So, have I experienced jealousy before? Absolutely. Does it make me sad? Absolutely, because I feel like there's room for all of us. I do, and that's why I've dedicated my platform to helping folks, make room in these spaces, because there is room for everyone. But it's inevitable, because humans are humans, and my goal is that if folks have the right tools to self-advocate at work, if they feel like they can um be supported, then they don't need to be jealous, because they'll be getting what they need to. How can you identify when your manager is jealous of you? Oof, there are some signs. The first way you can tell if a manager is jealous of you is if they ice you out of conversations that you should be in. A lot of times, exclusionary behavior is a huge telltale sign. It's also very high school, right? Where maybe it's they'll take other members of the team out to lunch except for you, or they'll talk about a project that you absolutely should have been on, and they're like, oh, we didn't want to loop you into that because we know you have a lot on your plate, so I'll just fill you in. The exclusion is huge. Pitting I love this, where this commenter said pitting other colleagues against you. Yes, that is also a big sign. It's called triangulation. If they tell one employee one thing and then they tell you something else, it's to incite confusion, and also potentially to make you look bad. And that's on purpose, because if somebody's being told something different, but the root of that is the leader, well, you may look like you're out of sync, or you're not up to date, and then it indirectly makes you look bad. Another sign that your boss is jealous of you is if they correct you on small things in front of the team. So, like, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people correct grammar, or when they correct, it is the smallest, it's, to me, it's small-minded behavior. I used to have a coworker who would do this all the time. I would use words, and then they would say, well, really, you mean this though, right? As if I did not know, like, as if I did not know how to use the word I just said. And they would do it all the time until one day I lit up, which I never do. I never, I try very hard not to speak out of turn, like get heated at work, but he would do it all the time. And finally, one day, in front, and he would do it in front of people. It was never behind closed doors. It was always in front of other people to make me look small. And like I didn't know what I was talking about. And it was because I knew he was threatened by me, but it was like it was so persistent. And so I said, there was one day we were all in a meeting and I said something and I forget the wording I said, but here he comes again. He goes, "Well, Beverly, I think what you meant by," and I cut him off and I said, "I think everyone in this room understands what I mean." And it was very biting. I don't typically cut people off like that. I don't typically, but like I couldn't take it anymore and I had to cut it down. I had to say no. And he never did that again. And he was just like, "Oh," and the other people in the room laughed because they had seen it and they knew that he was doing it over and over again, but it was it was small-minded. And every time he'd do it, I'm like, "No, I meant the words I said. Like you just maybe you just didn't understand, you know?" And so sometimes you like I love that, set the tone. Sometimes you got to talk to them some kind of way because they're going to keep going. Um, yeah, pulling work away. There's taking credit for your work. There's all kinds of petty things. From think back to high school too, right? Like what were some petty reasons why people would belittle you? The same high school never ended for a lot of people, especially in corporate. It's just a bigger campus. So, any reason you could think of that somebody could be jealous or be petty, especially as a manager, they're going to find it. And people can be jealous of you or a good character. Oh my gosh, absolutely. I've actually had more negative comments about my empathy at work than anything else, where leaders have told me that, you know, my empathy is a problem that like if I want to really grow as a senior leader, I have to be more steely. I can't be I can't be constantly advocate like all of these things. That's really hard for me. I remember one time I got a slap on the wrist because I spent out of my own pocket money for some raffles just to help with team morale because it was really low at this company I worked for. And the leader at the time who was supervising me, this was early in my career, she like was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you spending your own money to," and I'm like, "I'm just trying to," it was like board games and stuff. And I was like, raffles help. Like people are not feeling appreciated, give me a budget and then I don't have to spend my own money. But like that's where a lot of, negative comments have come from. Not including you on emails and meetings. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm finding it so challenging when the senior folks are gatekeeping key information. I'm wriggling to find some way to extract, but the more resistance I see. Oh yeah. I mean, that's how a lot of folks stay in at the top is they slowly siphon information. Um and you know, that's that's how a lot of them stay there though, because they keep it. That they gatekeep on purpose because they're fearful that they will be phased out of their role if folks find out that the really only reason why they're even still there is because either of relationships or because they've maintained this gate kept information and they're not letting anyone else have it. A lot of times folks who are legacy employees, folks who've been there since day one, they're often guilty of this too because the lay of the land is changing and they don't want to be cast out. So they hold on to inner inner knowledge. Here is a question from YouTube. Hi. Thank you for your question. How would someone handle workplace mobbing or harassment? So, lucky for you, I actually have a whole series that I did on this, my workplace warfare series, where I talk about how to navigate workplace mobbing. Now, what I will tell you on the live today is workplace mobbing is it is growing. It is a growing trend. And like I said, high school never ended for a lot of people. One of the tactics that I've discussed in videos on how to prevent workplace mobbing is to ice out, find out who the real ringleader is. Because a lot of times when people are working in a mob, there is one person who is the key person, and then there's folks on the fringe. And a lot of the time, the folks on the fringe um uh are maybe they're going along to get along. Think about like a popular group. There's the queen bee or king bee, and then there's the inner circle, and then there's the slightly outer circle, and there's the slightly outer circle. Identify quickly who those ringleaders are, and then quickly identify who those fringe folks are, because then what you can do is if you are in a situation where you can collaborate on a project, I always say, get somebody on the fringe of that group to partner with you on a project. You can start that process, because then if they're working with you and both of your names are going to be on certain responsibilities or projects or initiatives, they're going to start acting right because they don't want anything to compromise how they're perceived, right? So they're going to leave you alone. If you are navigating harassment, document, 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 document. I can't stress enough. Go to my website, beverlydines.com, and look up dealing with bullies at work. I walk through all of the best practices with how to navigate that and how to prepare documentation, because so many people don't. It is so important, y'all. The moment that you start experiencing, whether that is mobbing, whether that is harassment, anything of the like, you have to start your documentation process, because it is going to be the only thing that will protect you when you do advocate, whether that be to HR, whether that be to a lawyer, whether that be, to a federal governing body, state governing body, your union. It is the most important thing. So you can go to my website, beverlydines.com, to grab the Dealing with Bullies at Work class, or grab some time with me specifically. If you want some support with a specific situation, you can grab an empowerment session with me and we can meet one on one. And I have some availability as early as tomorrow. So if you are actively navigating some concerns at work, definitely head to my website, grab an empowerment session, and I have a few slots that are open for tomorrow. And we can meet one on one. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you all so much for being on tonight. As we close, like I said before, head to my website, beverlydines.com. We talked today about how to prepare for layoffs and warning signs there. I've got some exciting topics coming up over the next week. Tomorrow is the last Beverly's Break Room of this week. But remember, you can watch the recap of all of this week's Beverly's Break Rooms with all of my tips if you missed the previous ones this week at my YouTube, Beverly Dines on YouTube. So make sure you go to my YouTube, subscribe. If you don't already follow me on Instagram and TikTok, please follow me there. And then head to my website, beverlydines.com, so you can get access to those resources instantly, instant access. And I will see you at the next Beverly's Break Room. Thank you so much for being online. Thank you for your questions. And I will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Chat soon. Today's episode is sponsored by Create the Door. If you've ever felt stuck, undervalued, or unseen in your personal or professional journey, Create the Door will show you how to break the cycle for good. Beverly Dines, a powerhouse leader in creative force, shares her 8-step framework for manifesting success. Whether you're pivoting careers, chasing a dream, or tired of waiting for someone to let you in, combining real-world strategy, data-driven insights, and personal stories, Create the Door teaches you how to identify your true capital W why, leveraging your hidden skills, and build a life where opportunities don't just happen, you make them. Create the Door is available now at beverlydines.com and Amazon. This episode is also sponsored by Foxy. Ever felt like you want to be more creative, but something is holding you back? Maybe it's fear, perfectionism, or the belief that you're just not artistic. Foxy is here to help you break through those barriers. Foxy is an online art education platform that helps you explore your creativity in a safe, supportive environment. Founded by passionate educators, that creativity isn't just about making art. It's about living a more fulfilling life. With step-by-step courses, creative exploration classes, and a community that gets it, Foxy gives you the tools and confidence to tackle not just the technical skills, but the mindset challenges that keep you feeling stuck. Whether you're at a complete beginner level or looking to try something new, Foxy makes creativity accessible, and check them out at foxy.com and start your creative journey today.